أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another. Okay. Yep. Okay. Begin. Okay. Last time we covered in the Seerah. We'll do a quick try to do a quick recap. So the month of Sha'ban, before the month of Ramadan, the Ramadan in which the Battle of Badr was fought, Allah sent down 4 commandments, all within the space of 2 weeks. Number 1, Allah sent down the verses to go to war against Quraysh. Allah ordered the Muslims to start paying zakat al-mal, the fast. He ordered the Muslims to start fasting the month of Ramadan, and He ordered the Muslims to change the Qibla from Jerusalem to Mecca. This was very difficult a bit difficult for the Muslims, because fasting the whole month was difficult, and they had to start fasting within a couple of weeks. The changing of the Qibla, Muslims were criticized and made fun of, especially by the Jews, as saying, your people are confused. Your God doesn't know He doesn't know where He wants you to pray, whether it's Jerusalem or Mecca. And of course, zakah, poverty was rampant. A lot of people in Medina were poor, so paying zakah was not easy for them. So these were tests of iman. Now, I mentioned also before that the Quraysh decided to seize property owned by the Muslims, after the Muslims who had left Mecca to live in Medina. Now, they sent out other caravans, and I mentioned one particular one that was the caravan that was at Nakhla. The Muslims had captured that one, but after that one, during the month of Ramadan, the Quraysh sent out a new caravan, and this was the biggest one so far. A caravan consisting of about 1,000 camels carrying goods, stolen goods. And this caravan, because so huge, it was led by Abu Sufyan and escorted by 30 to 40 armed men. And this caravan would travel north, so it would pass by Medina, but pass by Badr in particular, and Medina on the way to the north. So of course the Muslims knew about this caravan, and the Prophet, they assembled a larger force than usual, 313, with the intention of capturing the caravan. So they weren't heavily armed, and they weren't going out to fight a big battle. So Abu Sufyan was leading the caravan, hears about this Muslim army coming out to capture them, and he quickly sends out an urgent message to Mecca. The Meccans assemble an army, initially 1,300, and they go out to meet the Muslims to protect their caravan. But Abu Jahl was the leader of the Quraysh army, and he pushed them. A lot of people did not want to go. Soon after, the Quraysh army gets another message from Abu Sufyan saying, "Don't come, you don't need to come, we're safe, we'll be able to successfully escape the Muslims." For Prophet now has been informed that the caravan has escaped, but he also finds out that there's a Qurayshi army that's now 1,000 on their way to fight the Muslims. So he needs to make a decision. So he holds a meeting. This is important because a Prophet was not a dictator, he was not dictatorial, and he wanted to teach the Muslims that, especially a Muslim leader, you should consult people before making a big decision. Even though he could have given an order and people would have obeyed him, he was the Prophet of Allah. He had a meeting and they all decided in favor of going to fight the Qurayshi and Mushrik army at Badr. The Muslim army arrives at Badr first, and the Prophet decides where the army should be for the following day to fight, where they will fight. But one of the Sahaba tells him that this is not the best place to place the army. He tells him, suggests another place, and the Prophet agrees. Now, the way this Sahabi proposed this idea, he first said to the Prophet, is this a revelation from Allah, or is it your own way, your own thinking? And the Prophet said, this is my own opinion. So the Sahabi says, why don't you place the army in this other place, and why don't you destroy those other wells, some of the wells, and keep some of the wells for the Muslims. And the Prophet is in favor of this idea, and he implements it. And I showed you this map. So the Muslim army is camps at the top of the picture, near Al-Udwat al-Dunya, and the Qurayshi army initially camps down here and near Al-Udwat al-Quswa. Initially they don't know the size, the exact size of the Muslims, that the Prophet doesn't know the size of the Qurayshi army. The Muslims managed to capture two young servants from the Qurayshi army, and they were interrogating them. The Prophet is asking them how many. They said, we don't know. Then he asked them, how many camels do they slaughter a day? They said, about 9 to 10 camels a day, just for food. So the Prophet is able to guesstimate the size of the Qurayshi army to be between 900 to 1,000. I also mentioned the night before the battle, a storm broke out over the battlefield, and it's not a large battlefield, but it was one cloud, one storm. But the majority of the storm fell on the Qurayshi army. The rain and the ground became soggy and difficult to walk on. Whereas the same storm, the same cloud, it also rained on the Muslim army, but it was very light and very pleasant actually. And the ground was on the Muslim side was not soggy, but it was firm, because the water came, a small amount of water, and hardened the ground, make it easier to walk on. And I also mentioned that the night before, and this is mentioned in the Quran, that Allah caused drowsiness over the Muslims. He allowed them to sleep comfortably and very well throughout the night. The Mushrikeen, on the other hand, the Qurayshis were not able to sleep well. They were thinking about the next day, what might happen to them. They might die, they might get injured. They were very concerned, and they were not able to sleep very well. And I mentioned the du'as made on both sides. Prophet kept making du'as throughout the night on the morning of the day, and Abu Jahl also making a du'a similar to what the Prophet was saying. May Allah give victory to whom He loves. And I also quickly talked about the scene from the movie and what was wrong with the scene. The sword. There were two things wrong with it. Number one is the shape of the sword, and number two, that the sword was captured during the battle and was handed out afterwards. Dhul Fiqar. Okay, so today I will talk a bit more about Badr. So Badr, in terms of the physical side, it was not a very big battle. So an army of 300 versus an army of 1,000. But in terms of world history, it had a huge effect on world history. So you compare that to other battles in history, where the armies were much bigger, the battles were much bigger, and more people died, and they had less effect on world history. There were huge battles in World War I, hundreds of thousands of people. Battle of the Somme, Battle of Verdun, hundreds of thousands on both sides. People died. in the end, had little effect on the war and on history. It was the Battle of Badr, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. It was a small, in terms of size, it was small, but huge effect on history. Now, the Prophet introduced some new ideas to the Arabs. He organized his army in formations, in rows. The Arabs had never done this before. There was one story of Sawad ibn al-Ghaziyah. So the Prophet had ordered the Muslims stand in line, and he was inspecting, like a military leader walking in front of the line. And whenever you see somebody not standing properly in line, he had a little stick and he would tap him on the stomach and tell them go back, or stand in line. So one person, the Prophet, he hit him, Sawad ibn Ghaziyah. Of course, it was only a slight tap. So Sawad says, "You hit me. I want restitution. I want justice." He's saying that the Prophet hit him, and he felt the pain from getting hit. So this person, who was poor, probably poor, and the clothes he was wearing, part of his stomach was exposed, the bottom part. So the Prophet, without hesitation, he exposes part of his stomach as well. He says, "Go ahead and hit me. Take your revenge." And what does the man do? He goes down and hugs the Prophet and kisses him on the stomach. He says, the Prophet asked him, "What made you do that? Why did you do that?" He said, "I might die in this battle, and I want the last thing, my skin to touch your skin, to be the last thing that happened to me, the person to touch before I die." He didn't die in the battle, but he wanted to be able to touch the Prophet before he died. But also shows that the Prophet was just. It shows that the Prophet wasn't. A lot of the modern leaders are like. They're very arrogant. On the way to the battle, the Prophet was sharing a camel with two Sahabis. I think Sayyidina Ali and another Sahabi. And they were taking turns riding the camel. And then the Prophet, the two Sahabis said to the Prophet, "Why don't you just ride, we'll walk." The Prophet says, "You two are not stronger than I am." He was fair. He wanted to share the riding of the camel equally amongst the other two people who were sharing the same camel. The Prophet also gave the Muslims instructions on how to fight a battle. He said, when the enemy comes near you, you shoot at them. So don't shoot your arrows when the enemy is too far away. Meaning you will waste your arrows, because the arrows will not hit the enemy. Wait until they come within range of the arrows and then shoot. So the arrows are not wasted and they hit the enemy. And then when they come very close, then you draw your swords. Don't wait, don't take out your swords too early. So the beginning of battle. Before the actual battle begins, one of the mushrikeen in the non-Muslim army, the Qurayshi army had arrived at Badr and they didn't have any water. They were thirsty, dying of thirst. So Al-Aswad ibn Abd al-Asad al-Asab, from the Qurayshi army, he makes a vow. He says, "I'm going to go and drink water from that well on the Muslim side." And he makes a vow. He's not going to break that vow. He goes towards the wells, and Hamza stands in front of him. And they have probably a slight confrontation, a small duel. Hamza managed to cut off his slice of his leg with his sword. Al-Aswad's leg. Aswad is lying on the ground, bleeding. He doesn't stop. He drags himself on the ground, intending to still go to the well and drink water to fulfill his vow, even though he lost his leg. Hamza then is able to easily finish him off with his sword. Then there's the duel. The Qurayshis come out, Utbah ibn Rabi'a, Shayba ibn Rabi'a, and Al-Walid ibn Utbah. Now, Utbah ibn Rabi'a, the Prophet commented on him. He said, that man is wise. If the Qurayshi army would listen to him, they would be safe. They would do well to listen to his advice. Utbah was against for going to war and going toward Badr. Now, who can tell me who is related to all three men? What lady is related to all these three men? Utbah ibn Rabi'a, Shayba ibn Rabi'a, and Al-Walid ibn Utbah. Sorry? Hind. Who is Hind? Very good. Very good. So Ibn Rabi'a and Shayba ibn Rabi'a was the father. Shayba was is the brother of Utbah and uncle of Hind. And Al-Walid was the brother of Hind. So the Prophet selected Hamza, his uncle, Ali, and Ubaidah ibn al-Harith. So Ali and Ubaidah were both cousins of the Prophet. And they all went and fought and killed the three Qurayshis. The battle then begins, and the battle cry is Ahadun, Ahadun. In the middle of the battle is saying Ahadun, Ahadun. The Prophet himself was involved in the battle, so he wasn't sitting back and watching. And this is another characteristic of the Prophet that we should all learn from. The Prophet mixed amongst the people, and he suffered the same things. He suffered the same the cold weather, the difficulties, the hunger. He stayed amongst his people. He didn't sit in a palace eating the best food. No. He worked hard and he mixed with them and fought with them. And the Muslims were afraid. What if he gets hit? What if he gets killed? The Prophet was urging the Muslims to fight. The hadith says, لا يقاتلهم اليوم رجل فيقتل صابرا محتسبا مقبلا غير مدبر إلا أدخله الله الجنة. He's saying, whoever fights today and is killed, patiently enduring and hoping for Allah's reward, pressing forward and not retreating, Allah will enter him into paradise. Saying that whoever dies in battle today is guaranteed will go to paradise. And this was one of the reasons why the morale in the Muslim army was so high. Whereas the Qurayshi army was the exact opposite. The morale was very low. They didn't want to fight. In the story of Umair ibn al-Humam, a 16-year-old Ansari, he heard the Prophet saying this hadith, that hadith I just mentioned, whoever dies in battle will go to paradise. So he says, he's near the Prophet, he says, Bakhin, Bakhin. He says, what is, like his expression of astonishment. The Prophet says, what makes you say that? What makes you say, Bakhin, Bakhin? He says, I hope to be amongst the people of paradise. And the Prophet says, you will be among them. So Umair he's had amongst the arrows he had some dates with him. He had I think 3 dates. He's saying to himself, if I were to wait and eat these dates so I can die, that life is going to be too long. He doesn't want to wait any longer. In a single second, he throws the dates away and throws himself into the battle in order to die. And this wasn't just Umair, other people were the same. Umair ibn Abi Waqqas, the brother of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he was 16 years old. He wanted to join the army so badly. He wanted to go fight and die in battle. So he was hiding amongst the other combatants, the other soldiers in the army. So the Prophet wouldn't see him and would say to him, you're too young to go out into battle. But the Prophet saw him and told him to leave. He cried. Umair was crying. He really wanted to go out and die. The Prophet saw him, took pity on him and said, you may join. But the Prophet wasn't just... the Prophet also would have seen him as being capable, strong enough and fit enough and capable enough of fighting. He permitted him to join. He didn't just let anybody join. And he selected the people who are able to go to fight. And other stories, similar stories. There was the Sahabiyya, I don't remember her name. Her son had died in battle. No, yes, and she wanted assurance from the Prophet because she loved her son dearly. She wanted assurance of the Prophet that he was in paradise. The Prophet said he was in amongst the people of paradise, and she was no longer sad. We get to the story of Umayy ibn Khalaf. Now, in the movie, this is shown incorrectly. The movie with the message. It shows you in the thick of the battle, Bilal sees his former master, Umayy ibn Khalaf. He fights him and kills him. The actual story is near the end of the battle, before the end of the battle, end of hostilities, Umayyah is captured by Abdurrahman ibn Auf, I think. Umayyah and his son. Bilal sees them, he says, Rasul Kufri Umayyah, la najawti naja. He's saying, I will not be saved and if this man is saved, is alive. And he will not leave them alone. But Abdurrahman says to him, do not see, do not hear me. He's my prisoner. But Bilal just ignores what he's saying. He skips and saying, La najawti naja, meaning he intends to kill him. And he's saying it loudly. So the other Muslims now hear and they come to help him. The Ansar. And this is another good thing that this is the example of the brotherhood. They saw their own Muslim brother Bilal distressed, seeing the man who had tortured him so badly in the past. They all came and supported him and they all killed Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Now just a few lessons from the Battle of Badr. The Prophet chosen the location, which was a very good location, but he took advice from one of the Sahabas to place the army in the correct position to fight the battle. The Prophet utilized intelligence, so to spy on the enemy army, to find out the size of the army. He formulated battle tactics. He positioned his men in the correct formations so they can fight the battle better. This was nothing new. Other civilizations had done this, but the Arabs themselves did not know this, did not fight this style of war. Now, throughout the battle, there are a number of things that Allah, agents, you could say, soldiers of Allah. Soldiers of Allah isn't a good translation from the Arabic, but people or creations that Allah utilized to fight, to defeat the mushrikeen. And first of them were the angels. And Allah has mentioned several verses in the Quran mentioning this. The first one in Surah Al-Anfal, I will reinforce you with 1,000 angels, followed by many others. And then in Surah, so the first was Surah Al-Anfal, I think the second was Surah Ali Imran. So Allah mentions 3,000 angels and then increases the number to 5,000. So this has been interpreted to mean that initially there were 1,000, and then Allah increased it to 3,000, then 5,000. And there was a lot of eyewitness accounts that confirmed that the angels were there. People saying that, Muslims are saying that they were seeing a mushrik person fighting, and then on the second night his head will be chopped off, just out of thin air, the head will come off. Another person would be, I think he was whipped, and there were green marks on his face. All the indications of the angels fighting with the Muslims. The other thing is Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet. And Abbas, after the battle, he was a prisoner of one of the Ansar. Now this Ansari was a relatively short man. Was Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, he was bigger and he was a strong man. And this Ansari claimed that he was the prisoner. Abbas was his prisoner. Abbas said, this is not the man who captured me. He said, the man who captured me was a big, strong man, bold. He looks different to everybody else. I did not recognize him. There's further evidence that the angels were in the battle. And Abbas was not killed. He was captured. Other things that Allah utilized, terror in the hearts of the unbelievers. So the Prophet mentioned in a hadith, came victory. Allah would send terror in the hearts of the unbelievers 1 month in advance. Another thing that Allah utilized is the tranquility on the Muslim side. they're allowing the Muslims to sleep. And as I mentioned, the storm the night before, the reduction in the size of the army. So the Muslims, before the battle, they were looking at the Mushrik army. The Mushrikeen looked small, like a small force. It encouraged the Muslims to go and fight. They didn't see the Mushrikeen as a bigger, much bigger army. And on the reverse, the Mushrik army, the Qurayshi army, majority of them saw the Muslim army as being huge, whereas Abu Jahl saw the Muslim army as being tiny, which made him push the Mushrikeen, the Qurayshi army, to go and fight more. He's thinking that the Muslims are a tiny, small party of people. Divisions amongst the unbelievers. People were against fighting the Qurayshi army, whereas Abu Jahl wanted to still fight. He imposed his will on the army. Another thing is the multiplication of a small deed. The Prophet, before the battle, he picks up some sand and throws it towards the Qurayshi army, saying, Shahatul wujuh, meaning that may their faces be disfigured. What happens is sand goes into the eyes of every person in the Qurayshi army, in the face, in the eyes, in the nose and mouth. Even though the Prophet only threw a bit of sand in the air from his hand. Allah mentioned in the Quran, وَفَلَمْ تَقْتُلْهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ لَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. You did not throw, but Allah was the one who actually threw. Abu Jahl, again, as I mentioned, was the one pushing the army, the Quraysh army, to fight. And of course, Iblis. Before the army went out of Mecca, they were afraid that the army would be ambushed by one of these tribes that were against Quraysh. So Iblis took the form of the leader of that tribe, saying, we'll not attack you. You go out and fight. There's quite a few other things, but inshallah, I think that's, yes. A few lessons, strategic planning. The Prophet took a lot of inspiration. He meticulously planned the battlefield, the battle. Of course, he took inspiration, but took into account the terrain, the resources, and the likely enemy movements.
Like the formation and all of that.
Yes. And on top of that, of course, he was flexible, and he allowed people to make suggestions and advise him as well. And he took that advice. And this is common throughout the Prophet's life. This happened in Badr, it happened in the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of Al-Khandaq. He took advice, had meetings, and he took advice from the people. Now, one of the tactics that Muslims had, the Prophet had, was to target the enemy leaders, which is why Abu Jahl was killed in battle, why Umayyah or Ibn Khalaf was killed in battle. And once you killed the leaders, especially Abu Jahl, the main person who was pushing the army, the Qurayshi army, everything fell apart. The army collapsed because the rest of the army did not want to fight. This is an important detail. Was Abu Jahl was the main one pushing the army to fight. Once he was dead, that was it. That was the end of the battle. And as I mentioned, leading by example, the Prophet himself actively participated in the battle. He fought the same battles, suffered the same things as the other Muslims. And this is an example of the Prophet's great leadership. And that's it for tonight. Any questions or comments from anyone? Okay. فستذكرون ما أقول لكم وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. This is mine.
Are you giving it to me?
Oh, do you want it?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's your laptop. What would I do?
I don't know. You might use it for your laptop. Not that you have a laptop.
My one's different. What is it?
Acer.
My
Oh, no, no.
Dell.
HP.
My one is Dell.
Dell. Oh, is that the work one?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Not only for the workers,
Yeah.
for anybody who